I had to get in my last bite of my protein bar. I apologize for that. Well, we're here once again. It's a Wednesday morning, apparently. And you're a part of the Astro Weather. Yes, you are. The weather isn't just out there, it's in there. And you are all generating from your inner sky. All right, what's happening? Another day in the open air, the open air psych ward, known as Planet Earth, the year 2025. My Lord. Let the games begin. All right, who do we have? DJ MC, top of the order, batting lead off. Our good dear friend Julie Sunshine 333, the big cat lady. Good morning. It's freezing cold in Michigan, 12 degrees. Yikes. We are in it now, aren't we? Rudolf Steiner used a term to describe what humanity's up against. The war of all against all. Yes, that is true. Feels that way. Guy Dance. Love me in New Zealand. Thank you. Yes, Guy Dance. Love back at you. Seeger 9-inch nails. Use the term what humanity is up against. He called it year zero. It's Antivos Nag Hammadi. And Topanga is 10,000 miles from the Gothenium. I like that. Is that a lure from a Reznor song, or is that coming out of your psyche there, Seeger? I love that. That's a cool line. It's Auntie Faznag Hammadi, and Topanga is 10,000 miles from Gothenium. That is a really cool line. And that's some Leonard Cohen shit right there. Jackie Delario checking in, the Empress of South Jersey. Scott Jerzik, buongiorno. Lily Lou, McKinney, Texas. The Jersey's got some chill in their part of the world too. We're supposed to get snow next week. The kids might have their oft wished for snow day here. Diane Evans, I'll be seeing you mañana. Let's see. Fires. My home was saved from the park fire here in Northern California last July. Well, thank God for that. Susan's with us. Hi, Susan. Tanya. Let's see. The Theosophical Building and Archives destroyed. Ooh, that's from the LA fire, right? Rich is obsessed with Paris Hilton. Rich, I actually know Paris Hilton. I can hook you up if you like. I could get you a FaceTime with Paris Hilton, Rich. If you'd like to do that. I'm just kidding. Artist here, Robert, my North Node is conjunct the next full lunar eclipse. We are close in age. Where is it on your chart? The big eclipse is going to be in September, and it will be right. It'll be right on my birthday in September. That's the big eclipse. So I've actually gone through that before. I went through that eclipse before. I think it was around 2006. And when we went through this last eclipse cycle in Virgo Pisces, I'm trying to remember what happened back then. Oh yeah, I remember now. We were supposed to move. We put this bid on this house in Berkeley, and it wasn't cheap. Like I remember this house was like around, I don't know, I think it was somewhere between the high fives and low sixes. And at that time, I actually had a very well-paying job that I detested because of the company I was working for. And I think my wife at that time also had a well-paying job. So we were double income, one kid. It was um, it was like kind of Berkeley, Albany, or actually a really coveted area, not in the hills of Berkeley, but it also wasn't in the flats on the other side of San Pablo. Um, and it was near sort of this like Berkeley rec center where they had a pool and all kinds of stuff. And I just started to think about this job that I had and that how miserable I was with this job. And I knew that the job wasn't going to last because the company was on wobbly legs. And so we were in, I think the offer had been accepted and we were kind of in that getting to know you phase. And I just had this gut feeling that we shouldn't buy this house. And so I told my she's now my ex-wife, but my wife at the time, I said, yeah, we shouldn't buy this house. I'm not feeling it. I don't think it's the right thing to do because I knew that if I had lost that job, that based on the mortgage of the house, I'd have to like just go run out and find anything just to keep it up. And, as a projector, and I knew at that time I was a projector, but I didn't know like specifically the dynamics of being a projector. But I knew enough, and I knew myself enough that I wouldn't be good just running out and getting a job. I've never been good about just running. I mean, I've always worked, but I've never been good about just running out and getting a full-time job. And as a projector, you have to be invited, right? And so I started to think about what that would feel like to have this six-figure income go away and then have the pressure of the mortgage on top of me. And it was a bit much. And so I said we should get out of this deal. That might have been like closer to 2007, I think, right around there. So kind of coming out of that eclipse. And so we got out of it. And of course, the housing crisis hits. And it could have been problematic, especially because the job did go away. And then the place that we were at after that, I didn't have to run out and go get another job. And that's when the astrology stuff developed, right? That's when I was able to have enough time to like plug into my website. And it was the summer of 2008 when Obama was running for president. And then I did a post on Sarah Palin. It's like, who is this person? So I did an astrological post on Sarah Palin and kind of got into her chart. It's the first time I'd done it on my website. And I looked at my, my stats and they just went, through the roof. I'm like, well, what's going on here? This is interesting. And then I realized that Elsa was picking up my stuff from a feed. And so I just started to create more astrological content. And well, here we are today at 8:14 in the morning Central Standard Time talking about astrology. And so I don't know if I had, if I don't know if I had done, if we had taken that mortgage on and I would have had to have gotten a job, maybe I would have wound up at the same place. I don't know. It's one of those philosophical questions that one is asked in one's life. Well, if I go this way or that way, does it turn out to be the same? I don't know the answer to that, but I know the choices that I made, and the choice that I made at that time was like hands off in the house. And we probably could have gotten through the housing crisis, and that house is probably worth now about I don't know, probably close to $1 million, and it would probably be been a good long-term investment. But then I would have had to have lived in Berkeley. I would have had to have dealt with like the craziness of Berkeley. I would have had to have probably stayed through, the whole COVID thing. And so at the end of the day, it worked out fine. The other thing, looking back on that 2006 period, which is when I think the last time I went through that eclipse cycle, and this is something that I don't really talk about very much, but when I do bring it up, people seem to be quite interested, is I went through a period from about 2006 to about 2010, 4 years, where I was a targeted individual. And I know it sounds weird and paranoid to talk about that in those terms, but that's what happened. And a lot of that was about proximity, because I was living not far from DARPA, which is up in the Berkeley Hills. You have University of California, Berkeley, you have Lawrence Livermore Labs, you have DARPA that's kind of nested in there. And DARPA was running targeting experiments during that time. And I know this for a number of reasons, because the things that I was going through, other people were also going through. We didn't have like a support group or anything, but I had enough feedback from the community, particularly through a acupuncturist I was working with, to support that claim in theory. And that was a very heavy time. But there are also other things going on for me astrologically as well, besides the eclipse cycle. So we're in it, artists here. Bill Brockman, good morning, magnificent city of Cincinnati. Believe it or not, I've always wanted to go to Cincinnati. It's good to see you, Bill. Thor at the door are between Steve and Rich. We have some, and Seeger. Steve, Rich, and Seeger. Fine wit in chat. I'll say that. Akanya checking in from Athens. Warlanda's here. Wit's entropy. Wit, I got some content come to you today. I'm behind, but today you get it. Josie's Jazzy Junk. Nora Rashid, the queen of speed. Lisa Ann White. Barbara Boots. 18 degrees. We're in the cold spell, aren't we? Laura E. Mindy Beth. Healing Heart Rosie. PMSO. Hi, Janine. Deborah R. My man Ryan in the house. Yeah, we've got a great crowd here today. There she is, the lovely and talented one, saving Austin one tooth at a time. Mr. Gray No More, looking at snow on Sunday. Debisu or Debisu, depending on how you pronounce it. She's with us. Lana Winkler. Yes, it is cold. Yes, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Interstellar Cosmic Conversations with Patricia. Yes. Good to see you. Moira, checking in from NYC. You can buy me a cup of coffee. That's right there. If you like to support the show, that's the way to do it. Proudly deplatformed since the 2010s. Meow meow kitty poop. Moon sprouts. Here you go. Hey, you know, I had the coolest reading yesterday. The coolest reading. Hi, Maria Donge. Sandra Jack Shaw, Soul Traveler. Zeroth Immortal. Steve, what's going on? Sweet Road Trips. Hammer Time, we got it. We got a crew in here today. Melissa Stanton, Sun Sue. Coachella Valley, Hanging Laundry. What's up, Hanging Vivi? Julia Payne, Neil Smith from Wisconsin, Matt Burns, Jen Adams. You're all here. Janice Phillips, the Oklahoma Wildcat. That's those are your lyrics. Those are fucking Leonard Cohen-esque, Sigurd. I'm telling you right now. Hi, Kristen Foos. Cass Sai. Hi, Cass. Platinum Happiness 2024. Checking in from Idaho. We'll always have Paris. I know, right? Beach Barn. Good crew here today. Knight of Cups. All right. I got to get going or people are going to complain. He spends too much time with that chat. Big Dave Sullivan's here. Maya Rose. How can I stop? I'm on a roll now. Claire. Let's see. Are we all caught up just about? Got to say hi to Bo. Linda Gordon. I got targeted in San Francisco. Yeah, you know, California is prime territory for that. You got Stanford. And Stanford, there was one time I was touring Stanford with the guy who's in charge of student programs. It was a very interesting. The thing about California is like there's just so much interesting shit that goes on in California. And I was at Stanford because my friend Stephen Kent was going to basically open for the Dalai Lama, who was speaking at Stanford. And when was this? It might have been around that 2006 period, I think. And so I was helping him out with like his music and, you know, sort of doing point of sale stuff. And, you know, I was good at that. And whenever we would do a live event, I would sell his music or, you know, I would kind of market and promote him. We always had a really good relationship that way. So he's going to open for the Dalai Lama, right? So there's two sides to this experience, right? The Dalai Lama addresses the entire student union in the basketball gymnasium, right? And then there's the private. They've got a chapel there on campus, and that was for like the big donors of the school. It was almost like having a private audience with the Dalai Lama. So we were there, like I think a day or two before, and we were getting taken around by this guy who was very cool. He was the head of student activities. And he just casually mentioned that Stanford is Langley West. Like, you know, it was just like, yeah, this is Langley West, meaning that if you took, you know, Langley, the head of the CIA or headquarters, and you had to have a Western outpost for that, it was Stanford, right? So like Stanford is crawling with spooks. And then of course you have the linear accelerator. So you have Stanford and Langley West, and then you have DARPA up on the hill in Berkeley, right? So you're kind of in this like pincer effect with these two establishments, these two universities that are engaged in some pretty heavy stuff, right? That was really, the whole Dalai Lama thing was really interesting. The amount of like State Department money and security that was spent on the Dalai Lama is enormous. Like your tax dollars, when the Dalai Lama is in town, your tax dollars are getting a workout. Let me tell you. It's almost like he's the head of state or something. What I guess he kind of is in some ways. Yeah, what a trip. All right, let's get into the weather. So the moon is in Leo today. Are we feeling a little bit more robust? It might be cold outside, but maybe it's warm on the inside. Maybe you're feeling a bit of hopefulness and cheer amidst the dystopic backdrop of our current times. The moon is in square with Uranus. Look at that. And it's only going to get even more square as the day goes on. This is very disruptive in terms of emotions, right? When I think of a moon Uranus square, especially in Leo, it's a little like a moon Mars square, but it's much more disruptive. Oh, I wanted to talk about this reading I did yesterday. Before I go any further, I did the coolest reading yesterday. Shout out to Heather in Austin for doing this, by the way. I did a reading. It was a relationship reading for a mother and a son. It's not that weird. So don't go there. And the son was present during the reading. And he's a teen. And it was like she employed me to help them work out conflict in their relationship. And so I looked at their charts with synastry. It was really fascinating. I mean, from an astrological perspective, oh my God. I mean, there's just, it would be a really amazing kind of teaching moment, actually, to throw those charts up there and just kind of go through this. But it was a really cool. I think it's the first time I've ever done that with a mother and offspring to kind of help them work through their dynamics of tension and try to help them understand why they're going through what they're going through and, you know, what they can do in order to alleviate some of that stress. So it was very cool, I have to say. And again, shout out to Heather in Austin for doing that, because pretty innovative, and even to her son for participating with it as well. So I just wanted to share that. It was very cool. Let's talk about this moon Uranus square. It doesn't last very long. It'll sort of trail off into the afternoon and early evening, but it is disruptive, right? It's a bit disruptive, and it can go either way, right? You could be the disruptor if you want. You don't always have to be at the sort of the behest of the stars and be the sort of the outcome of these aspects and the archetypal energies that they are transmitting. So a moon Uranus square would be while everybody else is down in the dumps and moribund. I think moribund would be the correct word. Maybe Siegert can chime in and do a thumbs up or a thumbs down. But down in the dumps, winter, moribund, you're the person that tells the inappropriate joke, right? You're the person that is the emotional disruptor. You're the person that chooses life, that chooses humor, that chooses goodwill, that chooses generosity. Like, you're that person. Like, this is how this can work in your favor if you so choose to do that. Right now, the part of fortune is just lurking right off of the moon. So it's like, well, maybe you want to invest in that, right? Maybe you want to invest in that. And then we kind of zoom out a little bit here, and we've got this moon trying to Chiron, which is, this is interesting because I had a phone call last night from my guy, Pete Seven, shout out Pete. And I had another DM today on Twitter, and there were really cool communications and just, kind of supporting the work here. And it was like, wow, that's really, it's really kind. I appreciate your kind words. And this is this moon Chiron trine. And it's like, yeah, practice some charity, right? Chiron is all about, for me, Chiron is about taking a risk. When you get into Chiron cycles, or Chiron aspects, it's like taking a risk, because you stand out with Chiron. Like that's what Chiron was about when he was born, right? He stood out, and he stood out in a way that his mother was absolutely repelled and appalled by, so much that she rejected him and abandoned him. But it's okay, because Apollo and Demeter adopted him, and he had the best adopted parents, in the cosmos, to help him become the greatest of the centaurs, right? And it's through that abandonment where other people come in and play significant roles, and can recognize the inner strengths of an individual. So that's how Chiron rolls, right? It's about sticking out, standing out, and then you have to take a risk in some ways. To me, Chiron is always kind of risk related. So with this moon trine Chiron, it's actually a really nice aspect to be the person who is the person that has some joie de vivre, or has some joy, or has some, um, lust for life, right? And it's disruptive with this Uranus moon, cracking jokes, being playful, being generous. This is a strategy for how we work through emotions today. The moon is also in sextile with Jupiter. And again, it's about at 4-degree orb. So as the day or night, wherever you are, progresses, it's going to stretch out, right? But Jupiter is all about jocularity. And it's all about, again, kind of being larger than life. So when you have a moon Jupiter sextile, again, that has to do with generosity. Buying somebody lunch, or random act of kindness with your kids, send them $100. Things like that reinforce your own abundance and reinforce this idea that all is well. I had another interesting reading yesterday. Long time consistent client. I probably work with him about once a year. Very well-established guy, working on some very interesting projects. And I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but it has to do with being generous. And I think this is something that he really practices, like the generosity of spirit, and kind of this sense. Oh, I know what it was. He's got these projects, one big project in particular. And as an astrologer, when you're working with somebody on a personal level, and you're dealing with like really high level financial projects, and there's a big investment and a big buy-in for that individual, there's a lot of responsibility involved, right? Looking at timing cycles, and then you throw that up against what's going on in the world, and it's like, well, the economy, not real great. We had Russ Winter on the show on Friday, and looking at all these different economic indicators. And so it's sort of like one of these things where you're on the clock, because there are aspects that are coming that are prime, right? And will those aspects be prime enough while whatever's going on in the world supports those aspects? It's an interesting discussion about astrology in general. So you have to take that into account. So it's not just what's going on in your chart, it's also what's going on in the world. So that was one of the things that I was talking about was, well, you have this and you've got to go down this path because you've been down this path and you built this thing, and ultimately your goal is to sell this thing. And I said, people in business have to be positive. That's why I'm not a business person, because I think I'm too dark. I can do this because it allows me to work through the darkness. But as a business person, you have to continue to invest in the thing that you believe in spite of the economic conditions. But you also have to keep an eye on the prevailing winds as well, right? And so there's something here, though, about like affirming that you'll have enough, affirming that by engaging in an act of generosity, that in some ways you're remediating the oncoming austerity, right, that Russ has talked about. So it's kind of a fascinating dynamic between, fuck it, I will determine the state and condition of things on my own, and then this other kind of force and influence which rests heavy upon us at times. Today's one of those days where you can do that, right? Where you can practice. And again, there's other things going on, the inconjunct, right, with Saturn, and Saturn is definitely, at least right now, also to some degree with Venus, is kind of getting out of that orb. But Saturn does represent austerity. Saturn does represent, the dire nature of the times. And so, there's the moon is on a string here with Saturn. And I think by activating the moon in the way that I'm talking about, it changes the nature of Saturn. So if you're hung up, right, and you're challenged in some ways to be more generous, to be more abundant, to be more jocular, right? Today's a good day to do that. We're testing. We're using this Uranus square to kind of test reality a little bit and kind of shake things up. Because if you don't do that with Uranus, you get shaken up. I've always been of the mindset that Uranus is one of the outer planets that you can interact with in a way that is creative. I've always dug Uranus, right? I'm born on the 22nd, and the number 22 is related to Uranus because it is the 22nd card in the major arcana, which is the Fool. And the Fool is the wild card, right, which is represented by Uranus. So I've always liked Uranian energy. So I understand it. And if you tap into it and you are creative with it, it is an ally. If you don't tap into it and you don't co-create with it, it will destroy your life, which is the nature of Uranus. So today with that moon, get creative. Or it'll be disruptive. And of course, these are very brief cycles, but we're looking at how we move through the day. Somebody wanted to know more about the Venus-Saturn conjunction, which we talked about a bit yesterday. And that's about commitment, right? This is about commitment. And in Pisces, there's always a sacrificial element involved with Pisces. You have to sacrifice one thing for another. That's the nature of Pisces. And over here with Jupiter, right, coming in, Jupiter is, again, another wild card here. Some people will say, well, this is temptation. It's funny that Jason Whitlock was talking about this a lot last night on his show. And there's a guy, his name is, I think, DJ Mathematics or something like that. And he hangs out with Drake. I think he's Drake's beatmeister or whatever. And Drake and Kendrick Lamar have this beef. And Kendrick Lamar has supposedly receipts that Drake is a pedophile and has been kind of calling him out in these rap battles, right? And then there's a song, so there's a dance that goes along with this song that Kendrick Lamar made, I believe, that calls out Drake. And LeBron James he did I guess an Instagram reel where he's dancing to this song, right? And this guy, DJ Mathematics, calls out LeBron, and he says, because he's dissing Drake by doing this dance to this song. And he calls him out and says, you're such a fucking hypocrite, because when you came to Toronto, I was the guy that hooked you and Drake up with women. And he's calling out LeBron James. Like he and Drake would smash women together. Smash, of course, you know what that means, right? And then he would go one step further and he would say, and it's not just women. LeBron, we know you like the white women. So this is coming out. And then, so Jason Whitlock is going on this very long diatribe about the value of commitment, especially when you're younger and all you do is think with your dick, versus, being led around by it and being compromised by temptation. Well, that's kind of this Jupiter square with Saturn and Jupiter square with Venus. On another level, or another example of this, and he spent a lot of time talking about this, and Jason has a temptation problem, so he turned to God, and every time things get hot beneath his navel, he starts having an ongoing conversation with Jesus Christ to help him with it, right? He talks about this. But then we just had this woman who supposedly banged 1,000 dudes in 12 hours, which comes into about 1.2 minutes per dude, right? And that's kind of in the conversation as well. Venus Saturn square, that would be chastity. And the Jupiter Venus Saturn conjunction would be chastity. And the Jupiter square would certainly cleave that. And Jupiter is always about more, right? So this is an interesting dynamic and how it's kind of getting played out in the world. And so those are two examples socially where we can see this happening, right? Yeah, even the sun today is in concert with Uranus. So don't be afraid to take the road less traveled, do something that is slightly out of character. There's if you've ever seen that movie, was it Midnight Express? I believe Oliver Stone wrote the script, and it's about Billy, what's his name? It'll come to me. He gets arrested for stealing. He's trying to move hash out of Turkey, and he gets busted. It's actually kind of an amazing movie. Billy Hayes, I think that's his name, Billy Hayes, and his character is played by this guy Brad Davis, and Brad Davis was one of those actors who should have been, could have been. Right, he had like that strange charisma about him, and he's amazing in this role. And so he winds up in this Turkish prison, and it gets so bad that at some point he's like in the bowels of this prison, and these guys in this prison are just completely like mind numbed due to the treatment and their environment. And they do this thing where they all kind of walk in a circle. They're kind of like in this stupor, in this trance, and they all kind of walk in this circle together, and it's a metaphor for like humanity. Humanity is beaten down. it's demoralized, and they're all walking in a circle together, kind of, muttering this Islamic prayer, but there's nothing kind of joyous or celebratory about it. It's sort of like they're just hanging on by a thread. And at a certain point in time, as he's doing this, hair disheveled, long, unshaven, all of a sudden he stops because they're kind of going around this wheel or something, and then he starts to walk in the other direction. Right? He's literally reversing his course. It's a very Uranian thing. All of a sudden, he's like, I'm going to go against this, this orbit that I'm in. And that's the beginning of his liberation, right? That's the beginning of him planning his escape. Now, there's a lot of editorial license with the script, but nonetheless, it's still a great movie. So today's one of those days. While everybody's going in a circle, kind of muttering under their breath, forgive them, Lord, they know not what they do. Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. Turn and go in the other direction and do something that's against the grain, but in a positive way. All right. Boy, we are really behind time-wise today, but let's bring in our star of the day. This one is difficult, I have to say, but I thought to myself, Robert, are you up for the challenge? And I'm like, yeah, I'm up for the challenge. Let's see if we can do this. And try to, because there were other people today that might have been easier, but I'm kind of up for the challenge on this. All right, so you know the drill. This is dedicated to True Hemp Science, your one-stop shop for all things CBD. Right here, part of the goodie bag. I bring it up every day. It's my prop, but it's a good prop as well. And there's more, of course, that goes along with the goodie bag. Spend $100 more. Type in 15MINS. You'll get that and more. $150 more, get you free shipping. There's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. And remember, True Hemp Science was voted the #1 CBD dispensary in Austin for 2024. And that says a lot for Chris and his product. So if you want to explore the healing properties of CBD, CBGA, low amounts of THC, this is your place to go. And you can always call, make an appointment, and you can make an appointment and then talk to somebody there and figure out what's going to work for you. All right, today's star of the day is Captain Beefheart, Don Van Vliet. And like Frank Zappa, of course, he has a relationship with Frank Zappa, which I'll get into astrologically. But like Frank Zappa, he is not everybody's cup of turpentine. Myself personally, I have listened to Trout Mask Replica. Like I get it, I don't get it. It's one of those cult records where if you spend time with it, enough time with it, you'll kind of understand conceptually what's going on, right? Like he's coming out of this blues tradition, but he's also kind of, a little Ornette Coleman, a little avant-garde, humor, right? And so if you're the type of person that likes sort of kind of rigorous things to, experience and then work through and then get to it. So it's like, oh, I get it. And I really like it. He's your guy. He is your guy. Go get Trout Mask Replica and get just about anything else by Captain Beefheart. Although there's nothing quite like Trout Mask Replica in his catalog. And maybe anything else in recorded music history. But if you're not that kind of person, then he's not going to be for you. Right? So what makes Captain Beefheart Captain Beefheart? And this is the thing that I was asking. Can I figure out, why he is commercially unacceptable? Really, because he critic darling, but commercially unacceptable. Like, he never had hit records, and he was okay with that. Like, he never, when you do music like that, you're basically saying, I'm never going to sell out. Like, you've created the parameters to not be a sellout. The other side of Captain Beefheart is he's a visual artist and a painter. And I think around like 1982 or 83, he just stopped making music and he moved to the desert to become a painter. I think eventually he has multiple sclerosis and he passed away not that long ago, actually. So what makes Captain Beefheart Captain Beefheart? Let's start with the midheaven. So it's the south node on the midheaven, and it's in Aries. And I feel like Aries is very confrontational, and Aries is kind of very spontaneous and off the cuff. It can be, again, very improvisational in some ways. It's like, we'll do it in one take, right? That's like very Aries. But here with the South Node, it's like been there, done that. And yet, conjunct the midheaven is such an important pull. Like, he knows how to do that, right? Because Aries are unapologetic. And so Captain Beefheart is unapologetically uncommercial, right? And I think it's the South Node. Like, he's creating from his South Node. And even though it's in his it's in his 10th house, so it's gonna get noticed. And the music is not melodic. It is not. It may have little patches every now and then, but it's not melodic. Melodic doesn't have a lot of harmony. In fact, there's a lot of dissonance, and I think you can see the dissonance with Saturn. Right? Saturn squaring Mercury, Saturn squaring the Sun, Saturn squaring Pluto, Saturn squaring Chiron. We talked about Chiron earlier, right? With Chiron in the first house, you stand out. You stand, and it's in Cancer, so he's very sensitive. Right? Cancer rising is very sensitive, and you listen to like Trout Mask Replica, and you ask yourself, well, how can this guy be fucking sensitive? This is the most insensitive and jarring music I've ever heard. I think in a way, it's a way for him to deal with his sensitivity, right? Like, he's taking on the dissonance of the world, and it's a way for him to deal with it and almost use it as like a repellent. Because some people might find his music to be a little repellent. But with Chiron, he's learning, again, how not to give a fuck. And he has Pluto here in Leo, and Pluto is really dominant in the first house. It's creative. It's creative, dominant. He's going to take creative risks. And it squares up with Saturn. He is not going to be commercial. And what's interesting is that he's a Capricorn, and he's got this Sun-Mercury conjunction, and Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn. And yet he is not, he's not one of those guys that has his eyes on the prize and says, I'm going to get to the top of the music business. If anything, he's, kind of fervently fighting against that. So as a result of that, you're going to get music that is discordant, at least for him. For us, maybe not for him. For him, it might have been the music of the spheres. He also has this Moon Uranus square. And again, we just talked about it, right? We just talked about Moon. Like, today is almost the exact, he's disruptive. Now, in this regard, Beefheart is creatively disruptive. And he's playing along with this, right? So, on a personal level, maybe this is how he keeps chaos at bay, by being a conductor or an orchestrator of chaos in his music. It's not for everyone. right? But what I find interesting is that when he retires, basically he's like by 1982, he's done. I think he has his last album in 1982. And what does he do? He moves out of the spotlight of the world, and then he goes into his fourth house and he paints, right? He begins to paint Libra art in the home, right? And I'm sure on a certain level that was a much more peaceful experience for him. So at some point, Captain Beefheart makes a pole shift and comes off of that south node and that jarring kind of confrontational, unapologetic, here's my music, and I don't have to explain it. And I don't have to apologize for, not making music that you can, hum along to and have an earworm. Although for some people, and I've noticed this about like people who really enjoy Frank Zappa, and I like parts of Frank Zappa. I don't like all of Frank Zappa, but if you get into like the theosophical world, right, and you go down into like Annie Besant and what's her name, Miller. You go into that world, Bishop Ledbetter. There's all these like esoteric classifications of like people and what people are into, like in terms of art. Like there are types in theosophy, and there's if I'm not mistaken, there's like a certain type that is much more akin or attuned to dissonance, and they find that like postmodern classical music is like music to their ears. Like there's a kind of a personality, there's like an esoteric personality type that vibes with it, right? And I think in a lot of ways it's much more mental. Now, one of the things that comes out with Zappa is that his music is kind of cold and unemotional. And you'll get this from people who listen to it, right? And then you'll get people listen to Zappa and they'll say, "Are you kidding me? It's filled with emotion." And it's a really interesting conversation about how we experience art and what moves certain people. And people will say, "Well, have you ever listened to Peaches and Regalia?" And Peaches and Regalia is, a beautiful piece of music, but if you really listen to it, like Zappa kind of cheapens it a little bit. Like he turns something beautiful into something slightly burlesque. Like he just can't have a beautiful moment, right? It's almost like, no, I'll give you this, but I'll cheapen it a little bit, right? But I think Beefheart's in the same category, only even less accessible than Zappa. Zappa plays a huge role in the guy's life. So if you go over here, like Frank Zappa is a 29-degree Sagittarian sun. So Beefheart's Venus is conjunct Zappa's sun, and the two are kind of bound together, right? And so Frank Zappa is engaged in this grand trine in Beefheart's chart. Moon, Venus, trine Saturn. And at the end of the day, right, you get this grand trine, and with the moon here kind of out of sign in Leo, this is his superpower. And he's able to carve out a niche for himself, while this T-square is going on in the chart in his life. And he has staying power too. Like for most people, you create Trout Mask Replica, maybe it sells, I don't know, 5,000 copies. Some critics get it, some don't. For some people, they would fold up the tent. Oh, not Don Van Vliet. He keeps going, right? He's got this Mars-Pluto trine. So he has endurance. And he has Mars in Sagittarius. Right? So he's going to be engaged in trying to expand his creative abilities, which is what Mars represents. So it's a fascinating chart, and I thought, can I talk about this in a way? He's got another grand trine too, right? Mercury Sun conjunction trine Uranus, and so he's experimental. In a lot of ways, he's kind of what I was talking about earlier today, when we got into this Moon Uranus square. I don't know if he was generous or not. I don't know if he bought Frank dinner, but it's a very interesting chart and a very complex chart, and I could probably spend more time with it. But I thought to myself, well, how do I sort of deconstruct this and try to explain his music and his art and his craft in a way that is reflective of his chart? So I took the challenge on. The other thing is that he does not have a lot of air. And people that don't have a lot of air, they lack objectivity. It's just the nature of the beast. And he doesn't have a lot of water either, right? So lack of water can be kind of, likened to perhaps lack of emotion. Now, his ascendant is in water, Chiron's in water, and that's pretty significant. He's got Pallas in Scorpio, 5th house. This guy's fire and earth, right? He's volcanic. He's like, tectonic. You listen to his music, it'll shake up your world. And I think in this case, the lack of objectivity could actually be quite good. Because if you have too much air, you're always kind of looking at things. You're always kind of looking at, how the world is interacting with you and treating you. You're your own witness. People that don't have a lot of air need other people for feedback. And if you listen to Captain Beefheart's music, there's plenty of feedback. All right. That's it. We're out of here. I hope you enjoyed it. Go forth. Carpe diem. Mods, thank you. Chataria, the best. Bar none. Treat each other well. God bless. Join us over on 15 minutes. I'm going to put the links in. I forgot to put the links in. But I'm going to put the links in right after the show ends. And the show is now officially over. Take good care. God bless. Bye for now.